Welcome to the Dana Grant Show, where heart-centered stories, authentic connections, real talk, and real action come together. I'm your host, Dana Grant, and I believe in the boundless potential within each of us. Join me as we dive into transformative conversations that not only inspire growth, but compassion with a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Let's embark on this journey together, unlocking all the power within and creating a life of purpose and fulfillment. This is the Dana Grant Show, where your story matters and your voice is heard, and I cannot wait to dive in. Welcome to the Dana Grant Show, where we dive into heart-driven stories, transformations, everything business, everything personal development. And today I have a really special guest for you. I have Laura Gassner Otting, and she is a powerhouse. You're going to be on the edge of your seat. She not only has served in the White House and is the author of 3 best-selling books, she is a daily contributor on the Today Show, the Good Morning America show. She's known for Stillin' Mugs across the country, and especially on the morning shows. And one of my favorite books, Wonder Hell. Oh, you've got to read. You can find it anywhere. And today we want to welcome Laura to the show. You're not going to want to miss this. Welcome back to the Dana Grant Show, where we are telling stories about heart-centered leadership. And we have with us today the amazing Laura Gassner Otting. And I absolutely adore your energy. I know that you're a contributor on the morning show. I see you out there all the time, still in mugs. And, and I want to just say welcome, Laura. And I'm going to start asking you, what led you down the road to start in the White House? Let's start in the White House and start there, unless you want to go back further.
Sure, we can start there. My very first real grown-up paid job was working in the White House, which is very interesting, and also even more interesting that my last actual paid, not full grown-up job involved changing bedpans in hospitals. So it was quite a raise, right? It was quite an increase from the high school job to, I dropped out of law school. I dropped out of law school because I heard this unknown presidential hopeful from a tiny southern state talking about this idea of community service in exchange for college tuition. And I was like, that is a great idea. That needs to happen. And I was so inspired and compelled by this young, charismatic sort of change of leader that I started volunteering on the campaign. And about 3 weeks after I started volunteering, all 4 principals, Bill and Hillary Clinton and Alan Tipper Gore, came to Gainesville, Florida, where I was in law school. And we got 36,000 people to show up at this rally. And the national office was like, who are they? We need to hire those volunteers. And hiring meant basically all the ramen soup and idealism and cold pizza you could eat. But it was a much better option from law school. So I dropped out. I joined the campaign. He made it to the White House. I made it to the White House, and I helped create the National Service Program, AmeriCorps.
Wow. That's impressive. I mean, what you just said was really impressive. Dropped out of law school. You made it, and I noticed that with you make a win out of every move you do. It seems like an up level. You're shifting gears. A lot of people would have focused on dropping out of law school.
Well, so now let me tell the story another way. Okay. I went to law school because my parents told me I should be a lawyer. And I went to law school because teachers told me I should be a lawyer. And I went to law school because I grew up watching Susan Day and Ally McBeal, who told me I should be a lawyer. And then I got to law school, and I was the very first student called upon on the very first day and asked question after question after question until I collapsed in a puddle of tears and shame. So I did what most of us young women do in moments where they find themselves in miserable situations. I dated the world's worst boyfriend. And I say the world's worst boyfriend had exquisite taste in precisely 2 things. The first being obviously girlfriend, but the second being unknown presidential hopefuls from tiny southern states. And he was like, we got to go to this guy's campaign office. He's running for president. And I was like, who? Governor? From where? Arkansas? Like, not a chance. We walk into the office, and there's this governor, and he's super compelling. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So I was basically flunking out of law school because I did not even understand how to study. I was dating this guy with like a mullet and an IROC, and not like one of those cool 2024 mullets. This is like a, this is like a 20, this is like a year 2000 mullet. Like, it was bad. It was like not, or no, sorry, the 1990, it was 1992 mullet. So it was like, it was a dirty mullet. He drove an IROC Z. I mean, he was just awful. And I looked at this governor, and I still believe in a place called hope, and that there were options and there were young people, and it was idealistic, and we were all so young and naive that we didn't think we couldn't win. Like, it was so exciting. And on the other side was drudgery and law school and fear and shame and embarrassment and this toxic boyfriend. So it wasn't like I was like, wow, I'm so brave and I turned it into a win. I was really running away from the thing that wasn't working and unknowingly found the thing that would. And so I think this happens a lot, that people tell the story from the win, but then
Yeah.
they don't go back and they're like, but actually, what really happened was,
Yeah.
if I didn't drop out, they would have kicked me out. If I didn't break up with that boyfriend, he would have dumped me, right? Like, so I
Yeah.
feel like it's very important when we're out there pushing the sort of success narrative,
Right.
especially as women, to remind people that, like, it's actually not all bright and shiny. It's pretty tough, it's pretty ugly, and there are a lot of losses on the way to the eventual win that we put out on, Instagram.
Wow. I love that. I love the first story, but I think I'm really, really leaning into the second because even in my own life, it mirrors a lot of the second, but it's always brought me to where I need to be. And I've watched you and I love that. So what happened after that? You launched your own firm.
Well,
Secret.
after that, I on the campaign trail, I met the world's best boyfriend, who ended up
Hmm.
becoming my husband. But on the road to that, he was about to move to Boston to pursue a PhD, and I thought I was going to go back on the campaign trail. I was like, like, it's 1996 is coming around. I want to go back out there. And my then boss, who was very much a father figure and a mentor to me, said, Laura, you're kind of too young to be the domestic policy advisor, but you're kind of too old to get back on a campaign bus and eat cold pizza. So talk to my friend Arnie Miller. He runs an executive search firm called Isaacson Miller. They place
Hmm.
executives in all the major universities, nonprofits, mission-driven organizations, socially responsible businesses in the country. And you can go hide out somewhere in one of those jobs, and in 4 years we'll come back and do something big on Al Gore's campaign. And I was like, sure, awesome. So I sit down with Arnie Miller a couple days later, and I'm about 10 minutes into this interview with him, and I was like, wait a minute, you work in Boston, you're from Boston. I'm dating this guy right now, I think he's the one. I want to move to Boston. I was like, I should come work for you. And he was like, you should come work for me. And so I became a headhunter. That's how I went into executive search. I just, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, great. What do you do? What's the job? Like, I didn't even know. I
Right.
just I just knew I wanted to be in Boston. And I went to go work for
Mhm.
him. And for 5 years, I really learned from the best and the brightest about how to do this work at the highest possible level with the
Right.
best possible quality. But about 5 years into it, I had this moment of rage where I was like, I think I can do this work different, better, faster, with more authenticity, more integrity, more profits for me, less cost for my clients, more flexibility for my team
Mm.
members. And I walked into his office and I was like, Arnie, there's a better way. And he was like, Laura, there's the door. I mean, it was like a
Ah,
Jerry Maguire moment where I
yeah.
had like manifesto in hand, and I was like, here is a way to do this work differently.
Mhm.
And he was like, look, you can stay. We love you. You're doing great work, but if you don't like the way we're doing it, you're going to have to go. And at that moment, I realized that if there was a better way that could be more of a solution for my clients, and if I didn't do the better way, then I was really a problem for my clients. And that was untenable. I couldn't stay. So I left and I founded my own firm. And 6 weeks later, I had 24 hours of labor and an unplanned C-section with my first baby. I would
Wow.
not recommend that order of operations.
Yeah.
However, I started my own firm and I ran that firm for 15 years until I eventually sold it to the women who helped me build it and grow it.
Wow. Let's just take that in for a minute. That's a lot.
That's
I
a
mean,
lot.
come on, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't realize I'd had a moment of rage
yeah.
until I was listening to Margaret Heffernan at a giving a book reading, and Margaret Heffernan wrote a book called How She Does It, and Margaret had interviewed like 100 different female entrepreneurs who had everything from, $60,000 in profit to
Mhm.
$60 million, right? I mean, revenue lines. And she said 201, every single one of them started their own business because they had a moment of rage, a moment where they're
Mm.
like, I can do this better. I can do this differently. And while I was sitting there, my company at this time was probably 6 or 7 years old. I was like, oh, I had a moment of rage. Like I didn't even realize it in the moment. But looking back, again, it was like dropping out of law school. It wasn't like I know the
Right.
thing I want to do next. It was like I just can't stay here. Like this, I was having like organ failure where I was. Like I couldn't stay where I was because I knew in my core that it didn't comport with my values, with my purpose, with my calling, with everything that I felt to be right. It wasn't allowing me to bring the very best of what I am to everything I do. And I couldn't even understand what it was that would get me there until I left. And so sometimes we find ourselves running away from something before we even know what we're running towards. And
Right.
in both of those schism moments, that's really what I had to do. And then, the path kind of became clear as I went, because when you're on your own, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're trying to build something, you
Yeah.
just don't actually do it unless you care about it.
Right.
Like you won't get up at 2 in the morning or 5 in the morning, or you won't do the extra lap. You won't make the extra call. If you don't care about it, you're not going to find the energy to
Yeah.
do it. So the
Absolutely.
path becomes clear about what you care about and what you don't.
I love that you just said that. I know that you're kind of known for the big idea, that big move.
Mm.
You know, in that, do you find the love in that? How do you attach the big idea to your motivation, to your integrity? I look at trust, integrity, all the things that make a good entrepreneur speak to the world. I think it has to be heart centered. You have to be anchored into your integrity, but how the big idea, talk about that. I really love how you show up with the energy and you manifest it into being.
Yeah, it's a very funny question because I think a lot of people are like, follow your passion. And you could hear what I just said as like, you're running away
Yeah.
from the thing and the path
Yeah.
becomes clear as follow your passion. And I have a real problem with that term because I think follow your passion is like the spoken word illegitimate sister of the live, laugh, love tattoo, right? It is this Instagram meme that tells us like, oh, if you just find your passion and follow it, everything's going to be easy. And what that tells you is like the very first time something is hard, the first time you get rejected, the first time a client fires you, the first time your favorite client leaves, but your worst staff member stays, you're like, I guess this must not be my passion. And everyone's like, tell me what you do if you knew you couldn't fail. Like, that's not your passion. Tell me what you do if you knew for sure you would fail. And you would do it over and over and over and over until you got it right.
Yeah.
That's your passion. And isn't your passion worth that? I
Yeah.
say for sure it is. And so I am passionate about what I do. What I love to do more than anything else on earth is I love to look at somebody and see their greatness. It is a
Mhm.
gift that I have. I can see people's greatness and I can pull it out and I can hand it back to them in ways that they can finally, maybe for the first time in their lives, see it. Or maybe for the first time in their lives, have enough confidence in it to act upon it. And so, really, that is a gift, but it's a gift that we all have, right? The ability to sit and see somebody, not just love them because they show up or they do their chores or they get good grades or they do the stuff that's in their job description. Not that transactional kind of thing, like you're playing the role of staff member,
Mm.
daughter, spouse, whatever, but truly see them, like sit for a minute and after they finish answering the question, sit in silence and count a few beats and see what else they have to say, right? Don't just jump in. Like, watch their body language change. Watch what lights them up. Watch what they get excited about. And it's a gift that you have as an interviewer, right? You bring out the story of people and you're able to get these incredible stories because you're letting people sort of unfold themselves in front of you as opposed to just this transactional, I ask you answer, like it's really that gift of
Yeah.
listening. And so people always tell me that I have contagious enthusiasm, but they also tell me that I have contagious moxie, right? I've got like this
Yeah.
contagious adventurousness. I've got this contagious uh, confidence in a way that,
Likability too. Contagious likability. You're
well,
likable.
thank you. I appreciate that. And I think really this sort of contagious audacity. And
Mhm.
sometimes when somebody looks at you and they're like, "You can do it. I believe in you, and I can help." The person's like, "I can do it. She believes in me. She can help." But sometimes that's all they need. They just need you. They need to borrow your confidence just long enough until they find their own. And so you take that and you wrap up in, in these like big ideas and these great turns of phrases and all of that. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to how we see ourselves. There's this great theory in psychology called the looking glass theory. It's 120 years old, and it says, you're not who you think you are, and you're not who I think you are. You're who you think I think you are. Right. So I'll say that
I
again.
love
You're
that.
not who you think you are. You're not who I think you are. You're who you think I think you are, which means if I'm looking at you and I'm like, you're amazing, I see you, I
Mhm.
trust you, I'm excited for you, you're like, oh, that must be awesome. Isn't that great? And so we all have that ability to like look at somebody and be like, hey, you're awesome.
I love that.
It's
I
so
love the
easy.
looking glass theory. I love that you brought that up and stated. I love that. So, do I dare ask you what my greatness is? Just in our brief
Well, I don't know that I know
encounter?
you yet. I don't
Yeah,
know that
I
I
know.
know you well. I got to spend a little time. But, I
Yeah.
do think, having listened to a few of your podcasts before coming on and obviously like seeing you on social media, just you you do see people in a way that you sort of let them come to you. You see what they care about. You understand that the story isn't just the story, right? And that there's always something that's back behind it. And sort of being able to look at somebody and see the values and the motivations and the what they hold dear, I think
Mm.
is a real gift.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. You know, if you could give like this bullet framework for someone
Hmm.
out there right now that's listening and they're looking at your success. You're a triple published author, you're on the morning show all that, you're a contributor everywhere. You just flew in from Northern California, where I'm at, presenting at Google. Everything about you is audacious. You're living in front of the line. You barely, I don't see you behind the line. I visually look at people's energy. I can see it move where they step behind and you are out in front in a powerful leadership role in your own life. I say money will follow authority. You've got to be the authority in your life. I see you as an
I
authority
love
in your
that.
life. So that being said, what can you say to the people listening that are struggling at the last Q4 of this year? What can you give them a nugget, a reframe in their life? Because um, I know that you have something inside you. I can feel it that can help listeners overcome their own fear in their path.
Okay, this is what I do. This is what I do every single time I think about some big, huge, audacious goal. I ask myself, what's the worst that can happen?
Mm.
And then I let myself catastrophize around that. Everyone's like, don't do it. Think about what's the best that can happen. No, no. Catastrophize on the worst. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my spouse. They're like, what is the absolute worst thing that can possibly happen? Okay, what if that happens? What do you do? Write down that plan. Like step one, step two, step three. Like what's going to happen? I give keynotes all the time for entrepreneur groups, and there's always somebody who's like, "What would you do if you failed at your whatever last business?" And I'll be like, "I don't know. You're an entrepreneur. You're here at this conference. What would you do if you fail?" And the answer is always, "Well, I would get a job at a cubicle, and I'd save some more money until I could launch my next thing." And I'm like, "Great, you have a plan. Now put that plan in a drawer. What will you do if you succeed?" Crickets. Crickets. Nobody ever, I mean, I've been asked this question for 7 years. No one ever has an answer to that because we spend so much time catastrophizing that we don't actually think about what success might look like. And the only way to stop catastrophizing is to actually just write down your plan for what if things go wrong. Then once you have a plan, you'll find that you don't worry about it anymore because you're not like, oh God, what happens? What happens? What happens? You're like, I know what happens. I don't have to, I don't have to worry about it. Am I allowed to curse on your show? Can I
Oh
say a
yeah.
bad word? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So my friend Leanne Davey, who wrote a great book about conflict called The Good Fight, she has what she calls her itty bitty shitty committee. And the itty bitty shitty committee are all of the little voices in your head that are all saying these terrible things. Now, Safi Bakal, who wrote Loon Shots, also uses the itty bitty shitty committee when he can't sleep at night. So he'll be laying in bed and he'll be thinking things like, he's got a voice inside of his head going, you got to get that report to, your client. And he's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it now. It's, 11:30 at night. So he makes a little note in his phone, write the report tomorrow. Okay, good. Are you satisfied? The voice over there? Yes, the voice is satisfied. Then I'll be like, okay, I know my wife really wants me to take out the garbage and I forgot. Okay, I'm going to write that down in my phone. And he just makes the list and he goes around his little itty bitty shitty committee in his brain, just like Leanne goes around, and he just satisfies all the voices. And then once he finds that all of those voices are like, okay, you have a plan for this, they
Mm.
stop talking because they know they've been taken care of. And that allows you all of the space to then actually think, what's the best that could happen? Right? Like you're not going to be able to take advantage of the success if you're not ready for it. There's science, and this is the last thing I'll say on this. There's science around making your own luck, and part of making your own luck is saying
Mm.
yes to things. Like it's not just people aren't just born lucky or not lucky. It's you
Yeah.
say yes to things. You act like an introvert. You put yourself in the deal flow by assuming the best might happen, by looking at things that are that didn't work and making them into learning opportunities. But you can't quote unquote manifest an opportunity just by writing it in scrolly font on your vision board. Your brain takes in 11 million bits of data every single minute, but it can only process 50. So if you say, I want to go to Japan, you didn't manifest a sale on flights to Tokyo on the bus that goes by you. By writing it on your vision board, I want to go to Japan and putting the pagoda and putting the sushi and whatever, you've told your brain when the bus goes by with the sale to Japan, notice it.
Yeah.
So by saying what's the worst that can happen and writing a plan and putting it in the drawer and then not taking any more brain time, but spending time thinking about what's the best that can happen and what it might look like. You signal to your brain when somebody says, hey, there's an opportunity. Hey, come to this event. Hey, you should interview for this job. Suddenly your brain notices it. And
Right.
then you can become more lucky in that last quarter of this year and beyond.
I love that. I love the way. Have you ever done a vision board, clarity board, down the rabbit hole board? Have you ever done a board? I call
So
them
I don't
clarity
have a
boards. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a board per se, but every year, sometime around October, November, I sort of sit down with the like, what do I want my word for next year to be? And
Mm.
then depending on what I want the word to be, what would that look like in all the facets of my life if that were to come? So in 2024, when Wonder Hell launched, my word was my word for that year was elevate. So
I
if
like
I were
that.
to launch a book, how do I do it in an elevated way? If I'm launching the book on Good Morning America, that's elevated. But can I
Mm.
get them to build an entire set for me? That's an even more elevated way of an elevated way.
Mm.
So like every single, and they built this incredible, crazy set for
Mhm.
my GMA launch. And every single step of the way, I was like, if I'm going to get big bureau representation, what is the elevated bureau? If I'm going to make a bestseller list, how do I get to the Wall Street Journal? Like how do I elevate everything? And my word when I set the word in 2023 for 2024, for 2022 for 2023, my word that I was like, well, 2024, it's going to be ease. I'm going to be exhausted. And I'm like, what if I just make everything easy? So I just
Mm.
basically go out to lunch for all of 2024 on the work I did in 2023. And then around the middle of 2023, everything was great. I made the Wall Street Journal. I've gotten rep by Vayner speakers. I'm, a contributor to ABC. I'm on Good Morning America all the time. Like I got all the
Yeah.
things. Great.
Yeah.
I realized I wasn't exhausted. I was actually excited. And that ease was really a reaction to my
Mm.
expected exhaustion. And then I was like, you know what? What if my word for next year is delight? Like, I'm just going to
Mm.
be delighted. Like, it is delightful to be here with you. It was delightful to show up in Northern
Yeah.
California to speak at Google yesterday. The day before that, I co taught a class at Harvard Medical School. How delightful that I'm in this opportunity that I get to do that. And also, how delightful that I get to fly home in time to have this conversation with you and then drive down to Providence and have visiting weekend with my kiddos in college, right? Like
Yeah.
actually spending that time, not saying how easy it's become to do these things because I elevated last year, but how delightful because you can't not be present
Yeah.
in the moment if you're going to be delighted. You got to be present. You got to just really just be there, have the energy, and just see the happy parts of it.
I love that. There's not any part of this interview that I don't love. It's full. If people are really listening, you have just given them a plan for 2025. I mean, it's a roadmap. You just road mapped it. I couldn't have asked better questions. And I
Yeah.
mean,
So like
yeah, you just took the
when
lead.
you
I
do
love
your
it.
vision board, I want to know when you do your board, right? What did you didn't call it a vision board? What did you call it?
I called it a clarity board, but I set an
A
intention.
clarity board.
I set
Yeah.
an
So
intention first. Yeah.
what's your process? How do you do it?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. When a company I created a long time ago, it was a cauliflower pizza crust company.
Hmm.
I go into the magazines and I stay very heart centered. I don't judge anything, but what pops out, I take and put on the board. It doesn't have to be color, everything and there was a huge white cauliflower in the middle of it. And I thought I really don't even love cauliflower that much, but I
That's what I
trust that.
thought until I started eating your pizza crust.
But I trusted that. So
Yeah.
trust is a huge part of looking, and it elevates for me, and I can see and I gather. So I gather and then I look at that and I think, isn't that interesting? And then I set an intention for the year, just like you. And I watch, and with flow and ease. I like the flow
Mm.
and ease. I think the push and the drive and the slay. In fact, I told my team, I think last year or 2 years ago, don't ever use that word slay in any of my material ever,
Yeah.
ever. I said, no slaying anything.
It's a little
That's
girl
it.
boss vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I said, ease and flow, because the more I realized exactly what you said, I looked at the worst case scenario, the best case, and there's been a lot of worst case scenarios that have come true. And how I overcame them is exactly your roadmap. It isn't all roses out there as entrepreneurs.
It's not. I mean, entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart, right?
No,
It is
no.
difficult. It is lonely. It is
Yeah.
scary. It is hard. And just when you think
Yeah.
you've got it all figured out, there's a global pandemic, right? And isn't it always an election year? And it's just
Yeah.
like there's just
Yeah.
constantly uncertainty. And at the same time, you're also changing, right? So the person who I was when I
Yeah.
started my company, I like as I mentioned, I was a brand new mother. I was 31 years old. Right now, I'm
Yeah.
53 years old. I have both of my kids are in college. I'm an empty nester. So what
Yeah.
I want, what brings me joy, what gives me purpose, what gives me calling, they're very different things today than they were 20 years ago. And we get
Yeah.
handed this definition of success when we are in high school, right? Somebody's like, pick a trade, pick a major, pick a college, pick a path, pick a career. And we're like, okay, right? Thanks, Ally
Yeah.
McBeal. I'll be a lawyer, right? I had a fourth grade teacher who told me I was argumentative, so I should be a lawyer. So I was like, okay, right? Like she's
Yeah.
planted the seed. And
Yeah.
I took it as if it was this definitional thing, like she is here to shape my brain. He
Yeah.
just that was like an offhanded comment, right? She probably doesn't
Yeah.
remember my name. But
Yeah.
Mrs. Giovanni told me that I should be a lawyer. So
And it stuck.
I
And
went
it
to law
stuck.
school. And then so there's like two problems. The first is we get these definitions at some point in passing from people who don't even have a crystal ball and who don't even really know us. And then we
Mhm.
don't give ourselves the grace to change.
Right.
Right. So,
Very
like, I
true.
like that you do this clarity board every year. And I love the process where you just gather things. Because, again, like the path appears, right? It becomes
It
clear.
appears.
Like, what do you have the energy to cut out of a magazine and what don't you? Like, I just think, people are like, follow your passion. What would you do? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do? That's your
Yeah.
passion. I'm like, no. What would you
Yeah.
do over and over and over and over, even if for sure you would fail? Because
Yeah.
that's your passion. So, like,
Yeah.
what are you willing to actually work for, to actually make happen?
I love that. I love that. I often say it's kind of like married to the process and divorce the outcome. If people want to see the outcome
Oh,
continually, and it's
yeah,
like, hey,
say that
let go.
again.
Yeah,
Marry
you
the
marry the
process.
process and you divorce the outcome. Because the
Yes.
outcome isn't what if I didn't have the disasters and the heartbreak that I've had, my outcome wouldn't look like this, which is
Yeah.
quite successful. But if I would have stayed and if I married that outcome, I'd be still there spinning in the defeat of that. But I metabolize very quickly. What do I need to know from this? What do I need to
Yes.
know? And it teaches me continual, just feeding me information. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
I think that's great. I was actually when I was in the car from SFO down to Google yesterday. I was texting with a friend of mine who's a speaker and another author and speaker does what I do, spending time doing keynote speeches. And I said something like, I think in 2025, I don't think I'm going to run a keynote practice anymore. I don't think I'm going to run a
mm,
speaking practice anymore. And he's like, what do you mean you're going to stop speaking? And I was like, no, I think I'm going to run a thought leadership practice. and that thought
Mm.
leadership. I mean, I've been so focused on building a practice where I get hired to go and give keynote speeches that a lot of the
Mm.
effort and the energy, like I spend all day long, like going on LinkedIn and seeing other people being like, here's me giving a keynote speech and here's me. And a lot of the people in this industry are kind of just giving book reports on other people's ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at them and I'm seeing their quote unquote success, which feels very much like not so humble brag, like look at me, look at me. And I don't know if they gave that speech that they're posting about today yesterday or if they gave it 3 years ago
Mm.
and they're just like
Mm.
they're just in the business of showing that they're successful. And I said,
Yeah.
no, I don't know that I want to spend all of my time and energy promoting myself. I'd like to
Mm.
promote the ideas. I'd like to promote the
Mm.
topics. I'd like to promote the insights. And from there, the success comes, right? Then people
Yeah.
hire me to be a speaker. Then people buy the books. Then people buy the courses. They do all of those things. But it's almost like this gravitational force of, does the energy come from the
Yeah.
speaking or does the energy come from the idea that drives the speaking?
Yeah, you just course corrected by the energy that you felt from your
Yes.
connection to just this year. I love that. I
Because
that was so on point. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
perfect. I felt that. It was
yeah.
like bullseye. I love that.
Because like in the beginning, I started and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to get on stages? And how do I do that? And let me build a practice that puts me on
Yeah.
stages. And so the problem I was trying to solve is, how do I get on the biggest stages I can for the most amount of money I can get paid, right? Like those, and how
Yeah.
do I do the best speech I can give? Like those were interesting problems to solve. And then as you solve those problems, you're like, okay, well, I've done that. How do I keep it interesting? Well, I keep it interesting by going deeper into the ideas and the content of what I'm talking about. And, and like,
Yeah.
how do I think about this or research this or come up with conclusions that people haven't gotten to yet based on my life experience and the
Right.
and the assessment that I put in the world and the data and all of that. And so just that question, like to have that clarity of like, what's the problem I'm trying to solve today? And
Yeah.
we all have two numbers. There's the need to make number and the want to make number, right? So there's like, what do you need to make to like pay your bill, to put food on the table, to do all those things? And then there's the want to make number, which is like, okay, you take a vacation, but are you staying at the Holiday Inn or the Four Seasons? Like, no shame to the Holiday Inn, right? But I'm a
Yeah.
princess, and so like, so in between the like, how much are you giving back to your community? How fancy is the car that you're driving? How nice is your house? How are you buying new wardrobe? Like, what is the in between the need to make and the want to make number? It used to be that I define success as like privilege and power and access and leverage and right, how do I get all like the fancy titles and the logos and now I'm sort of getting to this point where I'm like, between the need to make and the want to make number, my definition of success is really that everything should be driven by curiosity and joy. Right. So it's not saying I don't believe in the realities of economics. There's still the need to make number. Like you still got to like
Yeah.
make your nut. But in addition to that, if you're going to sacrifice time with your kids, if you're going to sacrifice training for a marathon, if you're going to sacrifice, binge watching Tiger King on Netflix or like whatever you're sacrificing, why are you sacrificing it? And does it come from trying to keep everybody else satisfied by like, I'm going to collect the title and the thing and the whatever to impress everyone else? Or is it the thing I actually care about doing?
Mm. Wow. Do we leave him with that, or do I ask you my final? I don't know. I don't want to
You can always
end.
edit it out
I don't
later.
want to. I don't want to end. But I got to ask, if you've heard my podcast before, what Laura feels like love in your life right now. What anchors you in right now that really just lights you up?
Oh, I literally just said this to my husband last weekend. We have the great and good pleasure of having children who we love and also like. And let me tell you, we spent 20, 22 years like building them into those people. Like that didn't just happen by accident. That was very intentional parenting on our part. And both of them happened to be home last weekend with their significant others. This first time. This is the first time this has ever
Oh,
happened. And I
wow.
turned to my husband after they left and I said, I have decided that the truest definition of happiness is watching the people you love being loved. And it was just I always thought like I'm gonna hate the people who steal away my little boys' hearts. And it
Yeah.
turns out I actually love them because they bring out a different and actually better version of my kids than they are without them. And just stepping back and watching the people in your lives, whether they're your kids, your friends, your siblings, your coworker, whoever, just watching taking some time, and I've done this now for the last few days since I noticed it, just watching the people who you love being loved by other people is
Yeah,
such a joy.
that's beautiful. That almost made me cry. It was so
I mean, it's an
beautiful.
unusual answer. I know it's like not a
No,
business podcast answer, but I'm really taken about how much in the last 53 years of my life I didn't notice how the people I loved were being loved by other people and how they received that, and sometimes didn't, and sometimes needed to more. Like just that, it's just a whole part of people that I hadn't spent enough time watching, and now I am. And boy, do you notice it when you notice it.
you said in the beginning, I have a superpower for understanding that you are constantly looking beyond. And I see this self exploration. You're willing to look beyond yourself continually, which is what you just did with, oh my gosh, look at this. I thought I would think this, but this is actually what really lights me up. I love that. How could people find you? What do you got going on for the rest of the year and next year? Tell us how they can find
Yeah.
you, what you're
Uh,
thinking about.
Sure. So my name is Laura Gassner Otting. All my friends call me LGO. So I'm at Hey, HEY, Hey
Yeah.
LGO on
Yep.
all the socials. I have an assessment that is out now that I have about 8,000 responses from 74 different countries, from every possible industry and every possible demographic. And I'm trying to build that up to 10,000 by the end of the year. So if people want to figure out what lights them up and how they can bring everything they are to everything they do, they should go to limitlessassessment.com. And if
Oh,
they are interested in me and my book, you can find that anywhere. That's
yeah. You can
anywhere
find it
my books are
anywhere.
sold.
I haven't read the other two, but I will because you are really such an interesting human. I
Well,
love
thank you
the
very much.
I love the way you process. You're always taking in data. I always say everything is energy. What you put out is what you pull back. But you have an interesting way of jumping into another energy field. And I just love it. I love it. I could
Well,
talk to you all day.
thank you. I love it, and thank you for turning me on to cauliflower because
Yeah.
and my
Yeah.
husband also who hated cauliflower. Now he's like, "Are we
Oh,
having one of those cauliflower flatbreads tonight?" And I'm like, "Yes, we are."
oh, I love that. I love that. Super. Well, it's so great to spend time with you. Have a great weekend with your children, your
Thank you so
son.
much.
And just thank you for being here.
Thanks. It's great to talk to you.